Dylan Wade is going to be a star.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. It's pretty clear to me, it's pretty obvious to me that we have a star in tight end Dylan Wade, currently a freshman for Maryland football. Sometimes there's just too much evidence. There's too many things that you see and things pass your eye test, and you know when you have a kid that is going to break out. And I'm not guaranteeing that Dylan Wade is going to be a star, but I have a pretty good, feeling that Dylan Wade is going to be a really good tight end for Maryland football. I think he's got all the attributes that you want. I think he's made of the right stuff. And the things that I've been hearing, the reports that I've been hearing, what Coach Locksley had to say, I think this kid, Dylan Wade, has a chance not just to be a good player, to be a great player for Maryland football. I'm not going to go ahead and say that it might not happen next year. We're going to see a lot of it next year as a sophomore, but it might be more of a junior senior thing where we're like, okay, this guy might be the best tight end in the Big Ten. I think that maybe I'm overhyping him a little bit. Maybe I'm a little bit out there with this take. I think this kid, Dylan Wade, has a chance when he's a senior, we look at him and be like, yeah, that's a top 2 tight end, top 3 tight end in the Big Ten. I think this year he has a chance to prove himself as one of the best young tight ends in the entire country in terms of freshman and sophomore tight ends. I think he has that opportunity to be able to do that. I think this kid's game is elite. I think that he was under-recruited. I think that we kind of got caught up ourselves as Maryland fans. We got caught up in the Rico Walker thing. We were like, oh, Rico Walker's a 4-star. This kid's a freak. This kid's coming in really highly recruited with all these offers from all these different spots. If you guys remember, Rico Walker was a freshman last year, played at the beginning of the year but his playing time definitely went down. But he has since transferred to Auburn, and we got excited about Rico Walker because he was kind of the big thing in that class in terms of tight end. We were like, okay, he can play defensive line. He can also play tight end, but we're going to play him at tight end. He's a freak type of athlete, and he made Rico Walker did look pretty good in a couple of plays that he was able to make. And so we got excited with Rico Walker, and Rico Walker absolutely overshadowed Dylan Wade as a player, and we didn't understand what Dylan Wade was. But after watching some of this offseason, after reading the reports, I am pretty confident in saying that I believe that Dylan Wade is going to be one of the best young tight ends in the country next year. And then as a junior and a senior, he could be a top tight end in the Big Ten. And I say that with confidence because of what I saw in the spring game. First of all, I was like, this might be the number one kid I want to see just because I keep hearing so much stuff about Dylan Wade and Coach Locksley saying that he's going to be a star. And so I'm watching him in the spring game. He hits one route, separates across the middle of the field. I'm like, that's a guy at tight end. Not all tight ends can separate like that. Not all tight ends can move like he can. And yes, he probably has to get a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger. He's still on probably the smaller side of things. But the way he can move, the way he can separate, the way he can run routes, I like that kid's game. It's a matchup nightmare. It's one of those guys that are impossible to guard. You can't guard people that are that big and that fast and that athletic. You just can't guard them. I remember this isn't the same thing, and I'm not comparing him to this thing, tight end, but I was watching the NFL draft, and I was listening to what Nick Saban had to hear about Bowers, the Georgia tight end who got selected to the Raiders, and he was talking about how Alabama we didn't know what to do with him because we couldn't put our corners on him because he'd be too big. And then if the way the defense is kind of schemed up, you might have a linebacker on him, but those guys aren't good enough in coverage to be able to cover those guys. And that's the trouble of having a elite tight end like that. And I see Dillon Wade, I see him as one of those guys that he's definitely big enough where he can make plays over smaller cornerbacks, and he's definitely too fast, too athletic. And I like the way he runs. He has too much ability in that case and in that area to be able to cover him easily. And I think that's what I'm seeing. And I saw it in the spring game with those couple of catches and the touchdown catch that he had. I was like, Dillon Wade is due for a big play today after all that I'm hearing from him. And then apparently he also impressed in the practice at Morgan State as well as Bellew High School. So those two scrimmages that they had before the spring game, there were reports that Dillon Wade was playing at a really high level, which is really cool to see for that kid. And I really do believe that he and MJ Morris have a connection as well, which I also think is important because it looks like MJ Morris is going to be our starter. I talked about that yesterday. Make sure to go check that out if you guys are interested in that. I do believe that MJ Morris is our starter. I don't think it's going to be Billy Edwards or Cameron Edge. I just think that MJ Morris is the best player for that spot right now. And the way the spring game went, I'm pretty confident in saying that MJ Morris is our guy next year for Maryland football. He's dual threat. He can throw the ball. He can run the ball. He's athletic. He's got a big arm. He can do different things across the field. But there's nothing better as a quarterback than having a tight end that can catch the ball, that can separate, that is a matchup nightmare. Just ask Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce hasn't made Patrick Mahomes, but Travis Kelce has made Patrick Mahomes' life a lot easier. And I don't want to compare him to some of these great tight ends, but I do like to compare how important it is to have a great tight end in your system and how big that can be. It's just so hard to match up with those guys. And I think MJ Morris has a clear connection with Dillon Wade that we're going to be seeing the next couple of years for Maryland football. And I think that MJ Morris and Dillon Wade is going to be MJ Morris's best friend. And I do really like this tight end room because technically Dillon Wade is technically tight end 2 right now. And Preston Howard is tight end 1. But I think both of these, I don't think there's really going to be a tight end 1, tight end 2 type of situation. I think both of these guys are going to play a ton. And Preston Howard is super talented in his own right. He's 6'6". He can move really well as 2. And Preston Howard, he's a special type of talent too. And so I like this tight end room a lot. The only thing I don't love is the youth. Those are 2 guys that are young guys. But again, I think that Dillon Wade can be one of the better tight ends when we look down the road in his junior, senior year. And then I think Preston Howard as well. So I think next year we could look at this tight end duo and be like, this might be the best part of our offense with potentially or not potentially, Caden Prather and Ty Felton will be gone next year. And so I think we could look back and say with this new tight end room, yeah, Preston Howard and Dillon Wade at tight end, that's the strength of our offense. Where this year we look at it as, maybe that's a question mark. But the more and more I see them, the more and more they play well. I'm confident in those 2 guys back there at the tight end spot. I would still love to add a tight end that's in the portal that's more of a older guy, a guy that really can block well, a guy that he doesn't have to be anything crazy or anything special in the passing game. I just want a guy that is pretty big, that can block, because I'm unsure of how Preston and Dillon Wade's run blocking is. And I just talked about it yesterday. I want to be able to run the ball more, and I think that we need to switch our identity a little bit, and you got to have tight ends that can block. Tight ends that can block in the run game make it a lot easier to run the football. And so I'm looking at it. I would love to add someone in that room that's a more of a veteran presence that can run the ball a little, or that can help in the run game a little bit, that can run block a little bit. But I want to talk about Corey Dyches as well because of how good he was in the Maryland offense last year. And I think Dillon Wade compares to Corey Dyches in a lot of ways in terms of undersized kind of tight ends, but they're too fast. They can separate really well, and they're elite athletes at the position. Corey Dyches had 49 receptions for 491 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so I think that Dillon Wade can do some of those things. I don't expect the numbers to look that good just because Preston Howard is there as well. But I'm telling you, this year, I think you're going to be like, yeah, this kid's a star. And then the next year, you're going to be like, yeah, this kid's a top tight end in the Big Ten and the entire country. I really do believe that with Dillon Wade. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe I'm out there saying that. But with all the reports, you got to be able to project ahead a little bit. You got to be able to predict some things that are going to happen. And I think that Dillon Wade being pretty special of a player is a prediction that I'm going to stick with. And I really, truly believe that that's going to come true. And again, remember the Music City Bowl game where he caught a touchdown too? He did some really good things in that game where I was like, yeah, like this guy has a potential to be a guy, but then it just continued to ramp up. It continued to look good. Last year, 10 receptions for 21 yards for Dillon Wade, but I think he's due to up that production at a pretty big time rate. Let's talk about Beau Brade and other Maryland football players going undrafted. I will talk about that after this ad from FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So make sure you guys visit FanDuel. I know you guys are watching the NBA and NHL playoffs. So if you want to bet on Luka Doncic's over in points, or Kyrie Irving's over in points, or James Harden over, or if you want to bet on the Clippers or the Mavericks to win tonight, make sure you guys hop on FanDuel. You get great deals, and you get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so there was a mistake made in the NFL draft, a huge mistake in the NFL draft. Beau Brade going undrafted is pretty crazy to me. I don't understand how it happened. I don't know quite why exactly. I'm going to give you kind of my 2 cents of things, but there is no shot that Beau Brade should have gone undrafted in the NFL draft. It was weird because a lot of people had him projected as a 4th, 5th round pick. Some people even thought he might be able to slide into the 3rd round. People had him that high on their board. I saw different mock drafts. I saw different types of media members talking about Beau Brade and his potential. And sure, he wasn't like the #1 safety on the board, and it was a weak safety class. There definitely wasn't a bunch of safeties that went. There was that kid from Minnesota, Nubin, who's a really high-level player. I think he went to the Giants, but there definitely wasn't a bunch of safeties that were going to go high up in the draft. But I thought that Beau Brade for sure was going to get drafted, and I thought he was going to be the #1 Maryland player off the board. Now that Delmar Glazegott was the #1 Maryland player off the board, it does kind of make sense, him being a multi-year starter on the offensive line and putting up multiple All-Big Ten type of seasons. And then also he was really high in the PFF rankings, if that matters to you. And then he also just was playing really high-level football at tackle, and that's what the NFL likes. And Beau Brade, it's interesting because he's been starting for a while now and had some really good seasons for Maryland football. And so a lot of people thought that he was the #1 guy on the Maryland board that was going to get drafted. But here's a couple things that I'm guessing why he didn't get drafted. I'm thinking because of the testing stuff. I'm guessing he didn't test well at Maryland's Pro Day. He didn't test at the Combine, so that could not have helped him overall. Whereas I watched Tarheeb Still get drafted in the 5th round, and I'm so happy for Tarheeb Still. I think he absolutely deserved to get drafted, and I think the Chargers made a great choice with selecting Tarheeb Still because I think his versatility as a player is just so cool, with him being able to play the outside, with him being able to play the slot. But Beau Brade is also super versatile, and all the different things that he can do playing up in the box, playing cover too high or too high safety, or playing in a cover 3, be able to cover ground. He's able to do a lot of different things. He's able to hit hard. He's able to cover. I've seen him cover man coverage. I think Beau Brade, I really do think the NFL made a mistake in letting him go undrafted. But like, back to the thing that I was saying, why didn't he get drafted? I'm guessing they didn't like the way he tested. They didn't find a lot on film that was like, this kid's an NFL starter. And I can see where you could be like, okay, this kid's probably not the most athletic freak back there. And in the NFL, it's a different game. Like, they can really attack you if you're not the best athlete. And I'm not saying he's like a bad athlete, but I wouldn't say Beau Brade's an elite type of speed, athletic guy back there at safety. But I thought his instincts and his playmaking ability and his hustle kind of made up for it. But I don't think he was an elite athlete back there, and I think that hurts in the NFL. They don't want to draft a guy in the 4th round at the safety spot that's not a guy that has a really high upside back there. And I think that was part of the reason maybe he didn't get drafted. Maybe they just thought he was a touch slow, and NFL doesn't like guys that are a touch slow, especially in the back end at the cornerback spot and the secondary at the safety spot. They don't like guys like that. So maybe he didn't test particularly well to get drafted, but it's one thing for you to slide in the draft, but it's a different thing for you to go undrafted. And that's a part that is kind of crazy to me. And the interesting thing is, like, I want to be careful because I don't want to say I'm like, there's no ways somebody shouldn't have drafted him in the 7th round at least, because once you get into the 7th round, this is something that I kind of forgot about. And I don't want to say I didn't realize, I did hear this, but a lot of players will actually apparently reject to get drafted in that 7th round because there are teams that have already called that say they're going to sign them, and they want to go to those teams because they know that those teams want them. And so there is a chance that he got drafted potentially and somebody called it, but he just decided to reject that. But I also don't know. That also could just be not true. And he just could have gone undrafted. But originally, like I said, projected to go 5th, 4th round. At one point during the draft, he was number 1 on Mel Kiper's board in terms of in like the 6th round, I want to say. He was like number 1 guy on Mel Kiper's board in terms of guys that hadn't gotten drafted yet. So it wasn't just like oh, like, we're just saying this kid should have gone drafted. Like, Mel Kiper, who's obviously the expert at ESPN and does some really cool things, does a really cool job with just, I don't know how he does it, grinding film on all these guys and knowing every single player. I don't really understand it, and I don't know how he does that, but credit to him. But he had Beau Brade as his number 1 player. And so I'm guessing that the NFL, sometimes the NFL and the media guys like the Mel Kipers of the world and those type of guys, they have kind of different types of they have a different type of feel for a couple of players. And I'm guessing Beau Brade was one of those guys that the NFL just didn't like. But he has signed with the Ravens, which is pretty huge. And I think that's a great spot for anybody to land coming off undrafted free agent. And he'll have a chance to prove himself in camp. And I know Beau Brade will use this as motivation, and this will not stop him. And he will continue to work, and he's going to go really hard. And trust me, that's a guy that's going to be pissed off that he didn't get drafted. And so you don't want to see a Beau Brade coming into camp after not getting drafted. I think he's going to perform really well at Ravens camp. And I will say this, here's my take. He will at least make the Ravens practice squad. I will guarantee that. Beau Brade is too good of a player, has too good of the instincts, too good of a safety back there, too good of a football player for him not to at least make the practice squad. And he might push to make the actual team, to make the 53-man roster for the Ravens. That's my take on things. But I wish him good luck with the Ravens. Talk about a couple of Maryland players, former Terps, that have found new homes. I will talk about that after this ad from Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. And Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's board. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel on boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasures in a robot machine. And there's always new timed events and help you win big, like a massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the Apple Store. Game on. So a couple of two Terps I want to talk about found their new home. I do like to talk about the couple players that found their new home once they're set, and I like to kind of just wish them off because realistically, we won't talk about them again. But I do want to talk about these two guys because especially this one, Corey Dyches. Interesting story for Corey Dyches because I didn't understand it at first. I didn't understand what was going on in the portal. I was like, what? Like, Corey Dyches originally committed to Charlotte, and I guess that was the best thing that he had, and we talked about it on here, and I was like, there's no way that Corey Dyches is going to Charlotte because I was like, there's no way he didn't have better opportunities, and I didn't understand it, but that was one of the examples of people were saying that it's not always better on the other side, and there's nothing wrong with Charlotte. I don't want to diss Charlotte, but in terms of Corey Dyches, a guy that put up almost 500 yards at the tight end spot in the Big Ten and is known as one of the better Big Ten tight ends right now, there was no reason for him not to be able to go to a Power 5 conference for sure. I would say there's no reason for him not to be able to go into the Power 5 types of schools, and he has now switched from Charlotte to Cal, which makes a lot more sense. So he gets to go play at a place that's a pretty good school and has a pretty good football program. They're not amazing or anything, but they're a Power 5 school, and I think he should be there because it didn't make any sense that Corey Dyches was not going to be on a pretty solid, at least solid, and just any Power 5 team. I was like, are we like missing something? Like, is it something about him as his personality or his grades or something like that? I don't know a lot about Corey Dyches, so I couldn't tell you the situation, and I don't know the ins and outs of it. But for him not to have anything else, I thought he was gonna be like one of the better players in the portal, like, and have a ton of options and a ton of people want him. But that's just not how it went down. But I'm glad that he was able to switch from Charlotte to Cal. I think that provides him to go against better competition, to go against better people overall, and play with the better people too. I didn't want to see him at Charlotte. I just think he was better than that. Again, no offense to Charlotte, but I think he was a better player than that. He deserved to play at a higher level than that, and I thought that there was no way he should be going to Charlotte. It didn't make any sense to me. And then also Caleb Swatton-Rogers, the former Maryland center. This one's pretty interesting. I did want to talk about this. Has committed to ODU. And so it's interesting because if you guys remember, Mike Jones, the former Terps assistant, is now the head coach at ODU. So he is able to land Caleb Swatton-Rogers, which I think is going to be a pretty good deal for Mike Jones. And that's a great thing about coaching and having connections in transfer portal. There's always connections and different things where you can get a guy from maybe a place that you were formerly and able to get a guy that maybe you weren't going to get originally. And I like that Caleb's going to play somewhere where he's used to the coach and he has a connection with Mike Jones clearly. And he has a chance to, I think, be a pretty good player there. I'm unsure if he'll start or anything. Like, I'm assuming he will. He's a pretty good player. He couldn't figure it out with the Maryland Terrapins, but I think he'll have a pretty decent role, I'm thinking, with ODU. And so I think he'll do some big things there. And I do like the fact that he landed at ODU. And I like the fact that Mike Jones decided to recruit a Maryland player, and he knows what Caleb Swatton-Rogers can do, and he's seen him every day in practice. And so he's got to have a pretty good idea, and he's got to like Caleb for him to recruit him, because if he didn't, he just wouldn't offer him the spot. And so I hope that Caleb does really well. I hope that Corey Dyches does really well. Corey Dyches' situation is really interesting to me. I want to see how he performs at Cal. I heard that Cal needed a tight end, so they swooped in and got him. But it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with those two. And I hope Mike Jones does a really good job at ODU as well. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.